Welcome to Haunted Tales, stories that linger in the shadows, waiting for you when the lights go out. Tonight's story is about a whisper, one that should have never been heard. It was a rainy night when Claire checked into the old roadside motel. The neon sign flickered as if warning her to stay away. The front desk clerk, a pale old man, handed her the key and muttered, "Room 6, don't open the window." Claire laughed nervously. She was tired from the long drive and too exhausted to question his strange words. Inside, the room smelled of damp wood and something faintly metallic, like rust or blood. As the storm grew louder outside, Claire tried to sleep. That's when she heard it, a faint whisper coming from the corner of the room. At first, she thought it was the wind, but then the whisper called her name. "Fly here." Her eyes shot open. The window was locked, the door was shut, yet the voice was closer now, as if breathing right into her ear. Shaking, she turned on the lamp. The room was empty, but in the reflection of the cracked mirror, she saw a figure standing behind her. A woman, gaunt, hollow eyes, skin pale and dripping with water. Claire spun around. Nothing. The room was empty again. Her heart pounded as the whisper returned, this time more urgent.
"Let me in."
Suddenly, the window rattled violently. Claire froze. Rain lashed against the glass, but she swore she saw hands pressing from the outside, thin, gray fingers clawing to get inside. She ran to the door, fumbling with the lock, but it wouldn't budge. Behind her, the window creaked open by itself. A rush of icy wind filled the room, carrying with it the smell of rot. Claire turned. The woman from the mirror was now standing inside the room. Her wet hair clung to her face as she whispered again, "You shouldn't have stayed here." The lights flickered, then went out. Claire screamed, but it was drowned by the storm. When the clerk returned in the morning, room 6 was empty. The bed was made, the window locked. The only trace of Claire was her car in the parking lot, and the faint sound of whispering still coming from the mirror. A new story, the shadow in the abandoned house. It had been empty for nearly 40 years. At the edge of a quiet town stood a crumbling 2-story house, its windows shattered, its walls covered in ivy. The locals whispered about it, how screams were once heard inside, how no one who entered stayed long. They called it the Hollow House. Ethan, a young photographer fascinated by urban legends, decided to explore it one autumn evening. He arrived just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of red and purple. His camera hung around his neck, and with every step toward the broken front porch, the air seemed colder, heavier. The door creaked open before he even touched it. Dust swirled in the beam of his flashlight. Torn wallpaper peeled from the walls. Broken furniture lay scattered across the floor, and a staircase leaned dangerously to one side. As Ethan snapped his first photo, a faint sound echoed from upstairs, a dragging sound, like bare feet scraping across wood. He froze. "Hello?" His voice trembled. Silence followed, thick and suffocating. He convinced himself it was just the house settling and stepped further inside. The deeper he went, the stronger the smell became: damp wood, rot, and something metallic, rust or blood. In the kitchen, rusted pots hung above a broken stove. But the strange part was the table. A single chair sat pulled out, as if someone had just been sitting there. On the surface lay an old photograph, half burned. Ethan leaned closer. It showed a family, mother, father, 2 children, standing in front of this very house. But their eyes had been scratched out. Suddenly, a loud thump shook the ceiling. Ethan whipped his flashlight upward. Dust rained down. He wasn't alone. Clutching his camera, he climbed the staircase. Each step groaned under his weight. The dragging sound returned, louder now. His light landed on a long hallway, lined with doors. All of them were closed, except one. At the far end, a door stood slightly ajar, darkness spilling out like ink. He raised his camera and took a picture. The flash lit up the hall for a split second. He saw a shadow standing in the doorway. Too tall, its limbs stretched unnaturally, its head bent at an impossible angle. When the light faded, the doorway was empty. His breath quickened, but he had to see. He pushed the door open. Inside was a child's room, wallpaper peeling with faded stars. Toys lay scattered across the floor. In the center sat a small wooden bed, and on it a doll. Its porcelain face was cracked, its eyes black and hollow. Ethan lifted his camera again. The flash went off. This time the doll's head had turned. It was staring directly at him. He stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. The dragging sound was now right behind him. He turned slowly, heart hammering. There, at the end of the hallway, stood the shadow. Its arms scraped against the walls, fingers long enough to gouge the wood. Its face was a blur of darkness, but he could feel its gaze pierce through him. The lights flickered. Then the shadow moved. Not walking, gliding faster and faster. Ethan ran, crashing down the stairs, his flashlight swinging wildly. He bolted toward the front door, but it slammed shut before he could reach it. Trapped. Behind him, the shadow descended the staircase, its body bending in ways bones should never bend. The whispers started then. 100 voices at once, murmuring, chanting, some calling his name, others laughing. He stumbled into the living room and found another door. He shoved it open the basement. Without thinking, he rushed down. The air grew colder, damp with mold. His flashlight flickered. In the corner stood something covered by a sheet. Ethan yanked it off. Underneath was a tall, cracked mirror. His reflection stared back, but it wasn't alone. Behind him, the shadow towered, grinning with a mouth too wide, filled with jagged teeth. The reflection raised its hand, but Ethan hadn't moved. Slowly, the mirror version of himself pressed its palm against the glass and then pushed through. Cold fingers wrapped around his throat, dragging him toward the mirror. The last thing Ethan saw was his own reflection smiling, as if it had finally been set free. The mirror cracked, the sound echoing through the basement. And then, silence. Weeks later, when locals entered the house, they found Ethan's camera on the basement floor. The final photograph showed his terrified face, mouth open in a silent scream, and behind him, the shadow, smiling. Last story of night. The weight on my chest. Emma had just moved into an old apartment on the edge of the city. The building was older than she liked to admit. Pipes rattled through the night. The plaster on the walls was cracked, and every floorboard seemed to sigh when stepped on. But it was cheap, and for someone starting over in a new city, cheap mattered. From her first night, though, Emma couldn't sleep properly. The silence wasn't really silence. It was filled with the hum of water in the walls, the distant cough of her neighbor, and sometimes something stranger. A muffled shuffling, like footsteps too soft to belong to anyone alive. She told herself it was nothing more than the age of the building. By the third week, exhaustion had sunk into her bones. That was when it happened. It was past midnight, the hour when the city outside had gone still. A dull orange glow from the streetlight cut across her bedroom wall. Emma lay half asleep, drifting into that blurry space between dreaming and waking, when suddenly she realized she couldn't move. Her eyes were open. She could see the ceiling. She could feel the sheets beneath her, but her body was frozen, locked in place. Her chest felt heavy, as if someone had laid a slab of stone across it. Panic bloomed. She tried to scream, to whisper, to even move her tongue. Nothing. At first, she thought it was a dream, until she saw the shadow. On the far wall, beneath the strip of orange light, a dark shape stretched across the plaster. It didn't belong to her, or to any object in the room. It was simply there. At first still, then slowly it lifted its head, peeling itself from the corner like liquid night. Emma's heart pounded, though her body betrayed no movement. The shadow crawled along the ceiling, insect-like, until it dropped silently to the floor. It stood there, tall and distorted, limbs too long, head bent at an unnatural angle. It had no face, only a black hollow where features should have been. And then it moved toward her bed. The air thickened, choking her lungs. She felt the weight press harder against her chest, crushing her ribs, stealing her breath. The shadow loomed above her, tilting what passed for its head, and in that darkness something gleamed. A mouth wet, shining, open as though inhaling her fear. Emma wanted to cry out, but no sound came. Her vision blurred at the edges. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the weight vanished. She gasped awake, gulping air like a drowning victim. Morning sunlight spilled across the sheets. The clock read 7:12. Her chest still ached, but she was alive. Sleep paralysis, she told herself. She searched her phone for answers. Rheumatonia, hypnagogic hallucinations, stress-related phenomena. All scientific, all logical, all reassuring, except for the memory of that gleaming mouth. That evening, Emma rearranged her bedroom. She turned the bed to face the window, moved the knitstand, even removed the old mirror that the previous tenant had left behind. It was a peculiar antique silver frame etched with curling vines and dozens of tiny eyes carved into the border. She thought it ugly. She thought it unsettling. She left it in the living room, intending to throw it out the next day. The second paralysis struck harder. This time the shadow didn't wait. It was already by her bed, crouched low, its faceless head inches from hers. She could feel cold air brushing her cheek, smell the dampness of its breath. Then she heard it. Emma. The whisper was sharp, like glass dragged across stone. Her blood froze. How could a hallucination know her name? She tried to think of anything else, to push the sound away, but memories surfaced her grandmother's voice, telling her old stories of the night hag, a figure that came when you slept wrong. If you ever hear it ask for your name, her grandmother had warned, don't answer. Names are doors. Once opened, they don't close. The shadow hovered, waiting, as if daring her to speak. Emma clenched her teeth. Inside her head, she repeated, don't say it. Don't even think it. And then she woke, body trembling, tears streaming down her face. The next morning, she carried the mirror to the dumpster behind the building. She wrapped it in a blanket, dumped it with relief, and walked away without looking back. But that night, she dreamed of it anyway. In the dream, the mirror was standing in her room once more. Its surface shimmered, not reflecting her bed or the walls, but another place entirely, a dim, unfamiliar room where curtains billowed in a stale breeze. In that room was another bed, and in that bed someone lay sleeping. At the foot of the bed stood the shadow, but in the mirror's vision there were two shadows, one watching the sleeper, the other peering through the glass, staring directly at Emma. She woke in a cold sweat, her throat raw as if she'd been screaming silently. By the fourth night, she was breaking. Lavender oil, chamomile tea, blackout curtains, none of it mattered. Sleep came like a trap, and when it did, she felt the weight immediately. Her lungs seized, her chest burned. She saw the shadow standing over her, more defined now, hair dripping like strands of ink, face a shifting blur. And this time it spoke again, but not with her name. "Love me the way you loved your grandmother." Emma's heart slammed in her chest. The shadow leaned closer, lips invisible but voice echoing inside her skull. "Say it. Say you love me." Tears streaked her face. She wanted to scream, to beg, to pray. And then she remembered. Her grandmother's bedtime prayers whispered against the night when Emma was small and scared. She mouthed the words silently, over and over. The weight shifted. The shadow recoiled slightly, as though the syllables stung. Its form rippled, unraveling like smoke caught in a draft. Emma pressed harder. The more she repeated, the lighter her chest became. She felt her fingers twitch, then her hand, then her lips parted with a gasp of breath. The shadow hissed. Its body stretched unnaturally, slamming a hand onto the bed frame. The metal groaned, frost spreading from its touch. But Emma had found her strength. With a final heave, she forced a sound from her throat, half growl, half sob. And suddenly the paralysis snapped. She sat upright, coughing, sucking air into her aching lungs. The shadow was gone. The room was still. But from the living room came a sound, a crack. The mirror. Emma staggered from the bed, adrenaline burning her veins. In the living room, the blanket had slipped from the mirror. Its surface quivered like water disturbed. And for a moment, just a moment, she saw a face inside. Not faceless, not alien, but her own. Her own face, twisted, hollow-eyed, smiling. She slammed the blanket back over it, dragged it outside at 4 a.m., and left it by the dumpster once more. When she returned the next day, it was gone, but the nightmare wasn't. The following night, she lay in bed, repeating her grandmother's words, whispering them until her lips went numb. For hours she stared at the ceiling, waiting. When sleep finally took her, it was merciful and dreamless. Until she woke to a note slipped under her door. Thin paper, shaky handwriting. "Did you find the mirror?" Emma stared at it for a long time. Then she tore it up, tossed it into the trash, and whispered to herself, "My name belongs to me." From then on, she still dreamed. Shadows still lingered in corners, whispers brushed against her ears, but the weight never returned. And every night, before she closed her eyes, she spoke her name out loud, clear, and steady, reclaiming it with her own voice. That was the whisper in room 6, but remember, every story hides a truth. So if you ever find yourself in a lonely motel, and someone warns you not to open the window, listen, because some whispers never fade.